welcome to the next edition of the Purple Surfer podcast with 360 Accountants. I'm Sophie Holmes.
And I'm Andy Steele.
And we've had a lot of questions about starting up in business and how to get started and what to be thinking about before starting. So you obviously started 360 just over 14 and a half years ago. So thinking back 14 and a half years ago, what were you considering before starting up in business, and what should people be thinking about before they're starting up?
It's obviously a massive step setting up a new business, particularly if you're going from paid employment where your wages at the end of the month are not guaranteed because businesses fail, as we know, but it's pretty much guaranteed, isn't it? So it is a massive step. And clearly it needs a lot of thought and planning and preparation before you make the leap. I suppose market research is the obvious first thing to think about. You know, is there a demand for your products or your services? How quickly are you going to start generating income? And on the back of your market research, you're then in a position to start putting a business plan together and some financial forecasts. The financial forecasts are vital, really, because they will show you what funding requirement you need. You know, once you get an idea of what your income is likely to be and how quickly you'll start generating it, you can then look at your costs. You'll often make a loss in month one, month two, depending on the sector, etc. And that loss has to be funded. So what's the extent of the loss? How much funding do I need? Where can I get that funding from? Do I have savings? Can I borrow it? Are there grants available? So I think they're probably the first things to think about. For me, it was quite easy because I knew I had clients that would follow me and were able to follow me from the partnership I was involved in previously. So I had quite a good idea of what my income would be from day one. The costs were easy. I knew how much the rent was. I knew how many employees I needed. I knew what salaries there would be on, etc. So it was quite easy. But when you're opening a shop, and on day one, a shop, restaurant, hospitality, whatever, you're turning the close sign to open and you're just sort of almost hoping that someone turns up to buy your products or your services. It's a little bit different. So
I suppose you had a slight advantage in preparing financial forecasts was something you were able to do as well.
Yeah, it's something I've been doing for many years. So yeah, that was quite easy. If I didn't have that skill and expertise, I would have engaged with someone that did have them.
I suppose as well, if you're a trade business and you've not got a credit line with anybody, having to fund those initial purchases as well, because they might have to be paid up front.
Yeah.
You've also got to consider how are you going to stock your shop or business, whatever it may be, to begin with.
Yeah, I suppose discussions with suppliers, you know, establishing what credit, if any, they will give you. You know, at what point in the future would they trust you to give you a credit limit, etc. All really important parts of putting a business plan together. You know, what's my pricing strategy? Am I competing with my competitors on price? So, you know, am I going to be cheaper, or am I charging a premium for a niche service or a better quality product or service? Yeah, I think the months in the build up to deciding, yes, I am going to set up my own business, or no, I'm not, or I want to set up my own business, but now the time isn't quite right. That you know, the preparation and putting the business plan together is vital, really.
So many businesses don't succeed past 3 years. What can be done to sort of maximise that success?
I think having a really good handle on your financials, having regular, reliable, up-to-date profit and loss accounts so that you can see how profitable the business is, what sort of margins are you making. That's really important. Some businesses rely on annual financial information, which is no good. It's out of date. If you're sitting down with your accountant once a year and looking at your December 23 accounts in May or June, it's just too late. It's too late to make decisions. So, management accounts every month, having a really good understanding of who owes you money, who do you owe money to, what are your future tax liabilities, are there any future cash flow pinch points that you need to plan for? Because asking your bank or your funders for help 2 or 3 months before you need it is far preferable, for obvious reasons, than asking them 2 or 3 days, or even worse, 2 or 3 hours before you need the cash. Because if they say no, you've then got time to look for a plan B. So yeah, a really good understanding of your financials is one of the most important ways of making a success of your business. There's lots of other things clearly that determine whether or not a business will be successful. So, how you market the business. You can do so many marketing activities for free nowadays with social media, etc. But you're probably going to need a really good website. Websites cost money. Social media, do you need to pay for adverts, etc. to raise your profile? Getting your pricing right, as I've already mentioned previously. But also not underestimating how difficult setting up a business is and how much time commitment there is. Have I got the support of friends and family? It's really important that you have got the support of loved ones, etc. Because the last thing you want after a tough day at work is going home and having arguments with loved ones, etc. about, doing your share of the workload around the house, etc. So, yeah, so many different things you need to think about before setting up in business. And I think having people around you that have set up in business, have gone through that pain, that agony, know the sort of time commitments, the pressures, etc. that are involved in setting up a business. Maybe they've made mistakes and they can sort of guide you to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes as them. So yeah, having a really good mentor or mentors will really enhance the chances of you making a success of your new business.
So when you took the leap and set up 360 Accountants, you initially rented offices in Melton, which is where we started. But should a business rent to begin with, buy? Should they work from home? Is there a preference?
I think definitely wouldn't advise buying business premises as a startup, because I think you need to make sure that the business is going to be a success before you make the leap into buying premises. You also need to know what sort of size you're going to get to, because the last thing you want to do is buy an office and then 6 months later you've outgrown it and you need to sell it again and find a bigger one. The route that we took at 360 was we started off in serviced offices. Serviced offices are brilliant because they're easy in, they're easy out. If you do grow, there's usually bigger offices that you can rent from the serviced office provider, which is what we did at 360. So I think we started off with 2 rooms, 3, 4, then we created a meeting room for clients, etc. But eventually, and this is the case with many businesses, we sort of recognised that we'd sort of outgrown the serviced office provision. You're sharing a reception with lots of other businesses. The receptionist isn't yours. You can't really brand up the reception area, etc. So it was at that point that we realised, right, we need our own offices now. We can brand up ourselves, where the meeting and greeting is done by members of the 360 team. And we wanted, we wanted to buy our premises so that the money we invested in them, the enhancement of the value of the building sort of belongs to us rather than the owner of the building. So it was at that point that we looked at buying somewhere. Personal choice, really. Some people don't like the commitment of bricks and mortar. Some people don't like paying somebody else's mortgage. I think it's personal choice, really. And then, as you mentioned, you have got the option of working from home, which may well work really well if there's just one person in the business. But once you start getting to a certain size, then you perhaps need to think about having somewhere where you can all meet and collaborate and train and learn together, etc. And if you're a business that sees clients, you probably can't see them at home, can you? You maybe want to impress them with some nice premises, etc. So I think start small with minimum commitment, easy in, easy out. See whether or not the business is successful before you start committing to bigger premises, perhaps longer term leases, or investing in buying bricks and mortar.
So it's obviously expensive opening a business, or potentially can be, depending on the sector and what's required, whether you need equipment, whether you need to rent somewhere. Apart from looking at external funding or using savings, are there any grants available that businesses could access?
Yeah, there are grants. There's probably not as many around as there were when we were in Europe. We're sort of transitioning now, and pots are sort of coming to an end. European pots are coming to an end, and we're not really sure what pots they're being replaced with. But there's still stuff around if you look hard enough. Certainly we can put people in touch with grant providers. So there's stuff around at the moment for employing people or employing additional people.
Yep.
Training, where you're training them to perhaps transition into management, etc. Difficult to get training grants to teach them to do the job, but if you're teaching them to do a different job,
or
upskilling, then there's often grants around, particularly in deprived areas like Hull.
If people are taking on premises that potentially need some work, is there any sort of energy efficiency grants they could potentially look at?
There are, and there's also Hull City Council, for example, provides a service where they will come in and look at your premises, give you free advice on things that you can do to become more energy efficient. And then there's grants available for actually doing the work. There's grants for businesses that want to put the first business plan together, businesses that are working on exit strategy. There's marketing grants available. But these pots keep changing. So the advice from us would be to talk to us and find out what's available.
So when you are happy with the structure of the business, when you're happy with your business plan and you're sort of getting ready to open, should businesses register for VAT straight away? Should they wait and register later down the line?
Yeah, we've actually done a podcast about this previously. Should I register for VAT? So there's, as with many things, there's pros and cons about registering for VAT voluntarily. You can register for VAT as a startup. I suppose the advantages of registering for VAT before you need to legally are that it makes your costs less.
Yeah.
Because anything that you buy that has VAT on it, as a VAT registered business, you're able to claim it back. So your costs reduce. It can make the business look more professional, I think, if you're VAT registered. If you're not VAT registered, then your customers or your potential customers know that your turnover is less than whatever the VAT registration threshold is at that particular point in time. Some businesses won't deal with businesses that aren't VAT registered.
Okay.
Local authorities, for example, a lot of local authorities won't deal with non-VAT registered businesses. I suppose the disadvantages of registering for VAT early are that there's a little bit of extra admin involved.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to prepare a usually quarterly VAT return. And also if your customers are the general public or non-VAT registered businesses, your prices will be more expensive because you have to add 20% VAT on. And if they're not VAT registered, it makes you more expensive. So if you're competing on price, that makes it more of a challenge. Having said that, because your costs are lower, you can reduce your selling price and still make the same profit. So once you've added the 20% onto the reduced selling price, you're not actually 20% more expensive. You're maybe only 15%. So I think a really good discussion with your accountant is really important. As a startup, you're often buying big pieces of kit, IT equipment, renovating offices, etc. So there can be quite a lot of VAT there. So it can make a big difference to your cash flow and your profitability registering for VAT early.
When we started this podcast out, one of the first things you said was moving from a sort of more secure monthly income to setting up your own business can be quite scary. How would a business owner pay themselves going forward?
Well, I suppose initially they need to be prepared for the fact that there might not be any spare cash at the end of the month to pay themselves. You've got to pay your staff, you've got to pay your suppliers, you've got to pay the tax authorities, and you're right at the back of the queue. So having some personal savings or perhaps a partner with a reliable source of income is an advantage. In terms of how you pay yourself, if you're a sole trader or a partnership, you would take a monthly drawing. And at the end of the year, you declare the business's profits on your tax return and you get a tax bill for it at the end of the year. Slightly different if you're operating through a limited company, because you have the choice of either paying yourself a salary or a dividend or a combination of the two. And what most owners of limited companies are doing currently is they're paying themselves a small salary so that they're still building up their entitlement to state pension, state benefits, etc., using up their personal allowance with the salary. The limited company gets tax relief on the director's salary, and then anything they need over and above that, they're taking as dividend.
Because the amount in the personal allowance is tax-free.
Yeah. So dividends are good because they're national insurance free. There used to be quite a big tax saving available by paying yourself small salary plus dividend. But with corporation tax being so high at the moment, anywhere between 19 and 25%, and dividend tax getting higher and higher pretty much each year, the tax saving available for limited companies compared with sole traders is pretty minimal nowadays.
The amount that's tax-free on dividends has reduced as well. Well, it's reduced significantly from, say, 10 years ago. And it's getting smaller and smaller every year.
So whereas people setting up businesses maybe 5-6 years ago were choosing limited companies, because it offered them the protection of limited liability, gave them the respectability of running a limited company, but also saved them potentially quite a bit of tax. Nowadays, people are setting up limited companies for the limited liability and the corporate respectability angles rather than to save tax.
Yeah. So there's obviously a lot to think about when setting up a business, whether it be a self-employed business, a partnership, or a limited company. There's a lot to think about, a lot to plan, and it is a big step to take. What can we do as 360 to help and support people looking at taking that step?
Yeah, so having been through the whole process ourselves, not too long ago, 14 years, I think we're really well placed to help guide startups through those initial tricky few months stroke years. We can help them put a business plan together. We can help them work out how much funding they need. Where can they get that funding from? Should they be a limited company, a sole trader, a partnership, or a limited liability partnership, or one of the other many entities that are around nowadays, particularly in the not-for-profit sector? How should they be paying themselves? How in a tax-efficient way? Should they be VAT registered? Do they need to help with employing people, setting up pay-as-you-earn schemes, payroll schemes, pensions, etc.? And then helping them choose accounting software, making sure that they're getting accurate, reliable financial information to make decisions on, and just basically helping them maximise cash, reduce tax, and just increase the chances of them being a success.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us on this Purple Surfer podcast. If you've got any queries, please contact help@360accountants.co.uk or contact us on any of our socials, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter and X. Thank you.